Hey y'all, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I want to show you how to take a plain pair of shoes and embellish them to add a little bit of sparkle to your wardrobe. I was recently inspired by some pictures I had seen on Pinterest that had relatively plain shoes, but then really embellished to add a little bit of definition. I'm going to be starting with these plain black mules that I found at Target for about 20 bucks. And you want to make sure the shoes you use are pretty plain, have a large surface area that you can cover, and don't have any extra seams or anything like that. I'm going to be using this stretch burgundy velvet that I happen to have on hand. You don't necessarily have to use stretch fabric, but I found it is the easiest to use. You'll also need a spray glue. There are several different brands out there, but I prefer using a spray so you get a nice even coat of glue and you don't have to worry about lumps. You'll also need a pair of fabric scissors to cut your fabric with, and then you'll also need whatever embellishments you are going to use. You can use lace like this doily. You could use pre-made appliques, maybe some costume jewelry you have hanging around. Really, you could use just about anything. Rhinestones, pearls. I'm actually going to be using these little embroidered appliques here, which I cut out of a piece of embroidered fabric I had bought. It just has a mesh backing around each embroidered flower group, and so I just used a pair of small scissors and cut right around that, and I did one for each shoe. Next, you want to take a piece of tissue paper and lay it over the toe of your shoe, and then use a pencil to kind of create the outline of the area in which you will be covering with fabric. You don't have to be exact because you're going to be cutting your piece of fabric a lot bigger, but you just want to get a general shape. Go all the way around the top part and then around where the top of the shoe meets the sole until you get just a general idea so you know kind of what shape and pattern you're going to be cutting out and using. From there, you'll want to cut out two pieces of fabric, one for each shoe. If you're using a fabric like this velvet that has a nap, you're going to want to make sure you cut them out in the same direction. A fabric with a nap would be a fabric that looks and feels different one direction than it does the other. So on this one, one way, if I rub my hand, it feels really soft and smooth, and the other way feels kind of bristly. So I want to make sure that I cut them out so when I apply the fabric to my shoe, if I run my hand from the top of the shoe to the bottom, it feels soft. You want to make sure that you're going to do the same thing on both shoes, otherwise the fabric may look a little bit different in color and texture once you have it done. So you don't even have to use pins for this if you don't want to. I just laid my little pattern that I made on top of the fabric and just roughly cut around it. Again, you don't have to be exact. You're going to be trimming all this off once it is glued on the shoe. Make sure to cut out one piece with the pattern piece flipped over since you have a left and a right shoe. Again, it really doesn't matter that much since you're cutting it out so big, but in case your shoes definitely have a different look to them in left and right, that may be helpful. These mules that I'm using, there's not much difference in the appearance of the left and the right shoe. Once you have them both cut out, it's time to glue them on your shoes. So you need to cover your surface. I use old plastic shopping bags to cover the surface that I'll be gluing on. And you're also going to want to cover any part of the shoe that you don't want to get glue on. Here I just kind of tested the fabric on the shoe, making sure I had the nap going the right way, making sure I still liked the way they looked. I tested a few embellishment options on it just to make sure that I was still happy with the one I had chosen. Now's the time to make any changes before you glue it on, just to make sure that you're still going to like your the items that you've chosen. So just use some old plastic bags. You can use some old paper or whatever, and some masking tape, some painter's tape, and just tape off any part of the shoe, including the inside that you don't want to get glue on it. Spray both the shoe and the fabric, and then lay the fabric on top of the shoe, gently smoothing it out, getting out any little air bubbles or any little folds or wrinkles or anything like that. Usually these kinds of spray glues, you do have a little bit of repositioning time, so if you do need to pull up a little bit and reposition it, you can do that. If there's some edges and stuff that don't look like they're completely glued down, don't worry. We're going to go back with a different glue and secure all the edges right down to the sole, just to make sure they are secured well and they won't come up. Once you have your fabric glued on your shoe, you can take your scissors and just cut it off a lot more closely to the sole. You still want to leave a little bit of fabric. You can trim it off really close later, but you're just cutting off a lot of that excess that's in the way right now. You can also take off the tape and the plastic or paper, whatever you used to cover the rest of the shoe to keep the glue off. You can go ahead and do that now. You won't be doing any more spray glue on these shoes. If you do have a little piece on the inside of your shoe that has some elastic on it, something that stretches, make sure you also cover that with tape as well. And then you'll just do the same thing with the other shoe. And then you're going to take a different glue. I'm using this quick dry fabric fusion. You could also use E6000, just any kind of a permanent water repellent or waterproof glue. You want to make sure it's going to stay through the course of wear. You're going to run a thin bead and glue down all the way around the sole, and then you're also going to glue the fabric around to the inside of the top piece there, so that there's no raw edges. You just need a very thin line of glue, and then you can use your finger or a Q-tip or a toothpick to flatten it out and to make sure you get glue right up to the edge. If you do get a little bit of glue on the soles, you can use a glue remover to get it off, or a lot of times the glue, once you wait till it dries, it will kind of just roll off if you use your fingers. So just be careful and go slowly, and again, if the fabric is still a little bit long and it goes past the sole, once this section of glue dries, you can go back with small scissors and trim it off right there next to the sole. But you want to do it all the way around the outside. I would do both the sides first and then leave the toe of the shoe for last. One good thing about the stretchy material is it will cover the toe, which is rounded. It will cover that a lot easier than something that's not stretchy. But here you see where that little piece of elastic is. I'm just going to glue it right up to that elastic so it can still stretch and do its job. And then start from there and glue along the sole. So once you get to the toe of the shoe, you're going to do the same thing. Apply your thin line of glue, spread it out nice and evenly, and then just very carefully push the fabric over the toe. You want to make sure that you can get it to lay flat and there's no little puckers and creases. If you have to, you can put some glue on the end of a toothpick and kind of stick it up inside any little creases that there might be to help hold it down. If your fabric's really stiff and maybe not as pliable, you could always cut tiny little notches or tiny little slits in the fabric right around the toe to kind of help it lay flatter, and then just make sure you glue all of those slits and stuff down. So here I've done all my gluing on both shoes, including gluing the fabric at the top over onto the wrong side. And I decided I did do some bead work on these little appliques, just adding in the centers of the flowers and stuff. So I'm going to use the same process of gluing these on. I will turn one applique to the opposite side, so they're kind of mirror image. So they kind of take that effect of the right and the left shoe. But I'm just going to again spray the back with some spray glue, and then very carefully fix them to the top of the shoe, making sure I get it in the right spot. And then on some of the edges that may not stick down as well, maybe like on the little leaves and things like that, I'll go back with some of that glue I was using around the soles of the shoes and a toothpick, and I'll add a little bit more glue to those small edges just to make sure that they don't come up with wear. But I think these turned out terrific. I can't wait to wear them with a pair of jeans and a sweater. I think they're really going to spice up my